Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Inner Work for Greater Good. My name is Emily Eldridge. I'm so happy you are here because especially if you are here to make a difference in the world or you want to shine your brightest light, I teach you the inner work that is required in order to truly do that. And so a lot of my work is about parts work and shadow work, and my signature technique, the drawing out process, actually permanently fully heals parts of you that are causing you to dim your light or to not shine as brightly or to have certain reactions that don't reflect the truth of who you are. And so that's what we're all about. So thank you for coming to my show. I hope you're enjoying this episode, and I hope you enjoy other episodes as well. Today's topic is what boundaries require. I'm going to share something with you that completely blew my mind when I first heard it. And then I've actually shared it with other people, and they've been like, gong, 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 gong. There's a lot of talk about boundaries, right? We always talk about, I got to set my boundaries. I don't have any boundaries. I need to work on my boundaries, or maybe your boundaries are too strong. Maybe rather than having boundaries, it's more like you have walls that actually prevent you from connecting with others and others connecting with you. So boundaries is a big one. And a lot of times when we have trouble in our relationships, sometimes it can be because maybe we don't even recognize or know our own boundaries, or we're not honoring those parts of us that are trying to get us to do that. Or maybe we had modeled for us when we were children, that it's okay to behave certain ways without consequence. And so boundaries are a big issue, aren't they? And I often say that healthy relationships require healthy boundaries. And that's not actually the sort of punchline of the title of this episode, but it's something I do want you to remember. Healthy relationships require healthy boundaries. In other words, a healthy relationship is not a boundaryless relationship. That's unhealthy. It's extremely important that we recognize our sovereignty, our individuality, as well as the other person's and their own free will and our own free will. And so that is what is required in a healthy relationship. And the reason why I really am emphasizing this is because I think we have this idea of like unconditional love, and that therefore you're kind of enmeshed with the other person and therefore you don't really have any boundaries. And that is just not true. I would say, for example, that my husband and I have a very healthy relationship. We really love each other. We enjoy each other. And we have to set boundaries with each other sometimes. Maybe someone says something in a certain way that's really unkind, and in that person's world it's like, well, that's what I said to everybody. And it's like, yeah, but within the relationship the other person doesn't like that. And so it's important to have those healthy boundaries and to respect them, to set them and to respect them, honoring one another and recognizing that those boundaries exist for a reason and that they are a healthy expression of that relationship. But in terms of the answer to the whole question of like what boundaries require, right? So I say healthy relationships require healthy boundaries. Well, what do boundaries require? This is an important one. And this is what blew my mind. And I'm going to give a full total credit to this woman who is my shamanic healer. I've had journeys with her. She is amazing. I adore her. Her name is Carrie Bazewski. She lives in Los Angeles. Her website, I'm just going to put it out there right now, is healingwithcarrie.com. That's Kari. So healingwithcarrie.com. So she does shamanic healing and journeys and Reiki and all this good stuff, but she also does this thing called her boundaries session. Now, I can't reveal what's in the session because, you promise not to reveal it. It's really important that she be the one to teach this method, this technique that she has. But there is one thing that I want to share with you that she said to me that blew my mind. And I've come to realize, oh my God, it's so true. Oh my God, it's so true. She said, it's not a boundary unless there's a consequence. Okay? It's not a boundary unless there's a consequence. Now sit with that for a second. Maybe your eyes are bugging out right now. I'm sharing this because I think it's so extremely important, because I think we think of boundaries as sort of like, well, I said no, which is true. I set a boundary. I said no. I'm not denying that that's not enough of a boundary in terms of like, if you said, look, I don't like it when you do that, or, no, don't do that anymore, that kind of thing. It's not saying that that's not setting a boundary, that you are expressing a boundary. But this has to do with when it comes to especially relationships and something with whom, you're in sort of a constant, I guess, interaction with, is that if there is a repeated pattern of behavior and you say no, and that person goes, oh, okay, and then they say they won't do it again, but then they keep doing it and they keep doing it and they keep doing it, or maybe they don't actually respect what you said. Maybe they're just like, yeah, whatever, or I'm just kidding, right? So you've expressed a boundary, and that is, you say no. You say no, that is not okay with me, I don't like that, however you put it. Okay, so that's, I would say, expressing a boundary and saying, this is my boundary, I don't want that. But if the person keeps doing it, and then you just keep saying no, 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 maybe you get more and more angry because you realize you're not being listened to, you're not being heard, or maybe you're shutting down, or whatever the reaction that you're having, but they keep doing that, then it's not really a boundary unless you've enacted a consequence, or unless you've expressed a consequence and you stick to that consequence. So for example, and it's so, like with children, right? Like a child, let's say one child keeps stealing a toy from another child, okay? And it's upsetting the child that's being stolen, from whom the toy is being stolen. And so you say to that child, hey, if you do that again, I'm going to take away this toy, that you love, for 1 week. That's a consequence. That's an understanding that you keep violating the boundary. This child keeps violating this other child's boundary. And as the adult in that case, you might say, not okay to do that. And if you keep doing it, I'm going to take away your favorite toy for a week. So that's a consequence. And what that does, and I don't know necessarily the brain wiring around this, but I think what most of us have seen and experienced for ourselves is that therefore all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, first of all, this person's serious. They really are setting a boundary. And also, if I keep doing this, I'm going to lose something of mine, or that person's going to respond in a certain way that I may not want them to. And so in that case, it's a consequence. It's not just a no. It's not just a, like, putting your hand and trying to stop them physically. It's also a, that if you do this, then this will happen, or I will do that. And so it's such a powerful, I think it's such a powerful point, because it's important to look at, I would say too, and this is why I've also learned a lot, is that I know that when it comes to my life and certain people in my life, I know that I have gotten so much better at setting boundaries. And I wasn't raised with very strong boundaries. It was always sort of like very fluid, or that I was supposed to put up with other people's behaviors for whatever reason. And so I had to learn boundaries, and I learned that from my own emotions and emotional reaction. I often say that anger is a great signaler that says, oh, you might have a boundary being violated, or someone's disrespecting you. And so the point is, boundaries is something that I've had to learn. And so I think I've gotten, for myself, pretty good at saying no, or pretty good at expressing a boundary. But the reason why I actually had that session with Carrie was because I had a relationship in my life where no matter how much I said no, or had conversations with that person, or expressed certain things, or whatever, they just kept doing it. They might have, shown some contrition at the time. Oh, sorry. Oh, I don't mean to upset you. Or they might have sloughed it off, or they might have, dismissed it. Well, I'm just kidding, or whatever their reactions were. But the pattern continued. Their behaviors continued. And so that's actually what prompted me to then have this session with Carrie, because I was like, I'm trying to set boundaries here. And, and she had already said that she does these sessions. And so I had that session with her. It was like mind blowing, because it was like, oh, I'm like doing part of it where I'm expressing a boundary, but I'm not enacting a consequence. And so I just went, and she has this whole special technique, the way she does it. So please take her session, because she's amazing. And she absolutely crystal clear expresses like why, like how to set a boundary, and etc. So I cannot do it justice. And besides that, this is her work, so I'm not going to take claim credit for her work. But that whole idea of a consequence, there needs to be a consequence. So I want you to think in terms of your own life, where you might have actually been setting a boundary. You might have actually been saying no, or you might have actually been, whatever, behaving in a certain way that you thought was a way of setting a boundary. But consider if maybe you haven't been fully setting that boundary, and consider if the person's behaviors or people's behaviors are continuing, because even though you're saying that no, or setting that boundary verbally, they may not be, respecting it. And in that case, you might consider that there needs to be that extra step. Again, Carrie has her whole way of teaching you how to do it in a healthy way. Okay. So I just want to say, please have a session with her if you want to learn more about this. But I just think that's a really important point, at the very least, to put forth, that if you find that there are repeated patterns, people's behaviors in your life, and they're not respecting your boundaries, then it may be because there's that missing element of a consequence. All right. So I hope this has been helpful. And I know for myself that I'll just say really quickly that I actually had a situation in my life recently where I had to actually do that. I had to actually use her language and sort of follow that formula of setting a boundary with someone, because basically they behaved a certain way towards me without apology. Even when I asked for an apology, they didn't give it. And so basically I realized that, I need to be very serious about this boundary and say it's not okay to treat me this way, and et cetera, and enact, set that consequence so that they understand that if they do that again, they know exactly what's going to happen. And of course, my job is to stick to that. And I will, because I feel very strongly and clearly about that. So, and again, that's thanks to Carrie. She's amazing. I adore her. Get with her, healingwithcarrie.com. All right. I hope this has been helpful. As always, I'm Emily with changelight.world. Please do take the free course in our free community. It's all free. Just get in there, hit request to join. You can totally get in there for free and start to take the free course and connect with other people and listen to my podcast, Dark Light Truth, lots of good stuff in there. All right. I hope you're well. Take care. I hope you're having happy holidays too. And I will see you next week.